r/AskReddit. What's one missing persons case that has always stuck with you? Blair Adams. He ran from Western Canada to the American South saying he was being chased by someone. No one believed him. He was found beat to death in a parking lot with $5,000 worth of 3 foreign currencies scattered all around his body. This reminds me of a story my orchestra teacher told us about her aunt where she had schizophrenia and type 2 diabetes to the point where she had to get bits of her amputated pretty often and she would scream and wail about the people in the wall. Eating stealing, me. Leah Key. She was left home alone for the first time ever during the remnants of Hurricane Andrew in 1992. Her mom went to work leaving Lee at home and tried to call her once she arrived. Lee didn't answer the phone and her mom got worried and left work to make sure she was okay. When she arrived home she found blood that hadn't congealed yet, but no sign of Lee, and she immediately called the police. Lee has never been found, but her glasses were mailed to her ex-stepdad a few weeks after she disappeared. Jennifer Kess. I ran into her father 5 years after her abduction, posting missing persons flyers at a gas station 3 hours away from her abduction site. He never gave up. Her beautiful face still haunts me and I still see posters around Florida 14 years later. Oh, that was the one with the unfortunately not very helpful video footage, right? Of the person dropping her car off at some parking lot. But the frame rate of the camera is so low that in every single frame the suspect is behind a fence post, so you can't make anything out. Jodie Husentroot. She was a news anchor who was abducted in the parking lot of her apartment on her way to work. Nobody was ever arrested in connection with her disappearance, and her body was never found. Just watched a video about this case a few days ago. Super sad. I fear her case won't ever be solved. Eitan Patz was 6 years old, disappeared on a crowded NYC street walking to the bus stop on the corner. Eitan was never found. Johnny Gorsh is the one that really sticks out though. 12 years old, Iowa boy, disappeared early morning while delivering newspapers. His parents were mailed photos of their son tied up in bondage. A sex offender confessed to kidnapping Johnny and selling him into a child sex slavery ring. Johnny was never found. He was the original missing child on a milk carton. Holy crap, the poor parents of that child. Kristen Smart, disappeared in 1996. Paul Flores was the last one to see her. She was reportedly too intoxicated to walk without assistance. The entire Flores family acted suspiciously in the weeks following her disappearance. My personal theory is that he took her to his room and sexually assaulted her. She subsequently died of alcohol poisoning. He called his father who helped him dispose of her body. The Flores family has recently been served with several warrants, so I'm hoping the family gets some closure and she gets some justice. There was a contestant on Chopped a few years ago whose sister went missing nearly 30 years ago. She wanted to win the show and the prize, so she could hire a private investigator to see if they could find any leads. I tried googling it. No luck to get the contestant or her sister's name, but I remembered that episode well. She didn't win either, but I hope at least her story got some exposure. Mount Vernon Jean Doe. Beaten and bound. Strangled. Then her body left out nude. In the middle of the day in a junkyard posed in a very ritualistic position. She was found quickly after her body was dumped. Feet together and arms spread out with hands up, like a crucifix. Ligature marks on neck, feet, hands, but when found the rope was removed. Cocaine was in her system, and investigators believe she engaged in sexual activity right before her death. She was so beautiful and young, yet no one knows who she is even after 30 years later. Police searched area strip clubs and interviewed underground crime regulars, basically seedy people known to law enforcement, and no one knew anything. Just a horrible way to go. And someone dumped her like she was nothing amongst literal trash. She wasn't trash. It gets to me. Edit. When you Google the case, actual morgue photographs come up. Very NSFL NSFW, so if you don't like seeing that type of stuff, hold off on researching her. The Sodder children. On Christmas Eve in 1945, the house of the Sodder family caught on fire. After evacuating themselves, they noticed that 5 of their children that decided to stay out late were now missing. Believing they were still in the burning building, Their father ran to get the ladder only to find it missing as well. Unable to call for help, their home burned to the ground. Only the next morning, firefighters and police could arrive. No remains were found among the ashes and debris, but the 5 children were declared dead in absentia, with the cause of the fire being placed on faulty wiring. However, the family was convinced that their children didn't just die in the fire. At the same Christmas Eve night, Mrs. Sodder received a phone call by an unknown female asking for a man Mrs. Sodder had never heard of before chuckling and hanging up. When Mrs. Sodder went back to bed, she was awakened again by a noise on the roof but went on dismissing these odd incidents until she could smell smoke. Further investigations revealed that the phone line had been cut at around the time of the fire. A late night bus driver would also come forward, recalling that he had seen fireballs being thrown at the Sodder home. Sightings of the missing children would also come in, including that of a Charleston hotel owner who had seen 4 of the children in the company of 4 Italian-speaking adults. 3 months after the fire, the youngest remaining child found remnants of a pineapple, an incendiary napalm bomb, which was now found to be the actual cause of the fire that started on the roof. Bone fragments were found during a re-excavation on the site of the former Sodder home, but they were found to have belonged to a 22-years-old male, while the oldest missing child was a 14-years-old boy. It is believed that the 5 missing children had been abducted by Italian agents and brought to Italy, or they did die in the fire, but the parents and surviving siblings refused to accept this. Either way, none of the kids or their remains were ever found. Madeleine McCann, unsure of spelling, the little girl who disappeared out of her bed while at a resort with her parents. My aunt was kidnapped 3 years ago. She had just turned 18 almost a month before. I had only met her once before. I remember the moment we found out because my mom's family were at a party when we all found out about their little sister. She was never found. No one is even looking for her. People are scared to even mention her name. We miss her. All of Flight MH370. Have you read the story about it in The Atlantic from this summer? It offers a pretty compelling case as to what happened. Too long didn't read. Pilot did a kamikaze suicide run into the Great Blue Ocean toward Antarctica. So like that one German airliner a while back, except this time toward an ocean. He made the passengers unconscious first. Bobby Dunbar. I know it was in 1912, but it still ducks me up that they thought they found the kid and returned him to his family. But a DNA test years after they were all dead showed that it wasn't actually Bobby Dunbar. Technically only temporarily missing. July 2014. I was working as police in a small town. Minimal staffing, so we had 3 police for 6,000 square kms. Then one called in sick, so we had 2 of us with 4 years experience each. A father calls and his son is riding his motorbike and hasn't made it to his house 280 kms away. We go talk to his friends and he isn't off at a girl's house. It's out of character for him to not turn up. We get him leaving work at 3 PM and filling up on fuel at 3:05 PM. He has a full tank and is riding a 1000cc motorbike to his dad's place, so he has about 200 kilometers before he stops for fuel. We ring every service station along either of the 3 routes he would have taken and no one has seen him. It's rural, so no traffic cams, and we get a ping off his phone around 3:30 PM saying he's gone the twisty way. It only got escalated to be worthy of a phone triangulation after we exhausted all other avenues. His phone is out of service, so we drive slowly out to the border of our area whilst still keeping in communication with dad in case he turns up. I had the feeling at about 9 PM that he'd crashed the bike and he was dead somewhere. Turns out I was right. He cooked a corner and cartwheeled the bike about 20 kilometers out of our area. Probably burst an artery and climbed back near the road in the brush. Took his helmet off and died. Dad and friends ended up driving the route at 15 km/h on the back of a ute and finding him 2 days later. I was shitty as hell how hamstrung we were with resources and that the neighboring area's police didn't give a duck until he turned up dead and they had to do the report to the coroner. His dad started a missing persons crusade on Facebook that I followed for a while. I got out of the police 5 years later with PTSD. I always think about this one particular guy laying there dying, wondering if help was on the way. It upsets me, but I'm told it was part of the tide that wore me down. Xavier Dupont des Ligens. Basically this French aristocrat, or just old money, super Catholic, has 4 kids, an awesome life on the outside, but had apparently amassed a great deal of debt. Suddenly his family, his sister and some other extended members, get letters saying he's been working for the FBI or something and they're all under witness protection and have to disappear for a while, but they'll be back so don't worry. Which I guess the family believes. After a couple weeks, friends of the guy's kids and his wife get really concerned and weirded out. Eventually they somehow get the police involved. The cops break their door and enter the home to find the wife and 4 kids and dog shot and buried in the backyard under the deck. They investigate and turns out he drugged them, then shot them in their sleep, and after burying them he left to go to a fancy hotel with expensive dinners and drove around for the first few days. After the 4th day he disappeared. The night after he murdered his family there's footage of him at a restaurant smiling and chatting with the waiter. The waiter said he seemed really nice and left a nice tip too. No idea where he went after the 4th night though, it's like he just disappeared off the face of the planet. Apparently he took some cash out and he was gone. They've been searching for him since but no sign. I know this technically isn't a missing person who's a victim or anything, but it's always freaked me out how this man murdered his whole family and just disappeared. He might be somewhere with a new wife and kids now. It's terrifying. My dad's. Just because it is really hilarious to me. So he was not a good dad or a good husband. My mom left him when I was about 5. His response was to pack up and leave without saying anything to anyone. So apparently all his friends thought he was a case of a missing person. They went to the police and tried to find him but with no luck. So they finally had a funeral for him because they assumed he died. When he went back to visit them, I guess a number of his old friends thought they were seeing a ghost. How long was he gone? And why did they think he had died? I feel like there's a lot to this story. A good friend of mine disappeared. He was a physician's assistant and a good one. One day he didn't come to work. His car was gone. He was never found. As far as any of us know, he had no enemies as he was one of the nicest people possible. William Tyrrell, 3 years old, was when he disappeared. He's been gone for over 5 years. It's believed he was abducted but there is 0 leads. He was playing hide and seek in his foster grandmother's backyard with his little sister. He was last seen by his foster mother before she went inside to make a cup of tea. When she came back out she couldn't find him and called the police soon after. Edit. Changed how he disappeared. I got information wrong. The Jamie Claw situation sticks with me. Guy for no reason picks a random girl to follow home because he saw her get off a school bus once, kills her parents, and abducts her. Luckily she managed to escape and is safe now. Didn't help my constant paranoia of my surroundings because that happened a state over from where I live. Reading these comments, it's just crazy that you can literally disappear off the face of the earth and nobody will ever find you. The earth seems so small but yet massive. The Skeleton Brothers. The dad in jail and still after years hasn't told where they are or if they're alive. I think you mean the Skelton Brothers. Eloise Whirlidge disappeared from her suburban house overnight in January 1976. The case was all over the papers that summer and kind of slid off the radar as time passed on with no resolution. I was a similar age to her, so it was a scary realization that the world can be a terrifying place. Maura Murray. For those who don't know, Maura was a 21-year-old nursing student at UMass in Massachusetts who, for no apparent reason, drove her barely functioning car to a part of New Hampshire where she had never been before, crashed into a snowbank tree, turned down help from a bus driver who stopped at the scene, and minutes later, when police had arrived, was gone. 16 years later, no trace of her has been found, and no one knows what happened to her. She's no longer missing, but Atsumi Yoshikubo, a Japanese tourist who disappeared while visiting Yellowknife. It was over 2 years before they found bones out in the wilderness that confirmed her death. This is super recent, but Jennifer Doulas blows my mind she hasn't been found. Delphi murders and the Missy Bevers case. The suspects seem so casual right before killing. Today is the anniversary of the Delphi murders, I believe. Illicit Turney. Her stepdad absolutely had something to do with it, but won't say anything until he's on his deathbed. One of my students' mom disappeared while going to the store. They found her dead in a field. Amy Bradley for me. Those two people who say they saw her, especially the businessman guy who was 100% sure, plus those escort photos that might be her. I just wonder if she's still alive, and how? Jean McConville. For a long while she was part of the disappeared. No point me retelling stuff, but if you're interested, look it up. Must have had a very harrowing end to her life. For what? What did it accomplish? The dumbass balloon boy shit. Ahahaha, that was some bullshit. The Springfield 3. I've always been fascinated by all of the facets that the case has and how many suspects and potential leads have been found only for nothing to come of it. There's a lot of conspiracies. Sierra Lamar. I know they convicted the guy who killed her, but where is her body? And also, Dulce Maria Laves. She's a 5-year-old girl who vanished from a playground in New Jersey about 5 months ago. There have been no real clues in the case past the first week. Susan Powell. Came here to say this. Listening to the Cold podcast gave me chills. It's such a heartbreaking story. Tell me about her case, if you would. Sunday the 6th of December, Josh goes on a spontaneous camping trip with his and Susan's 2 sons. The 7th of December, Josh's mother and sister go looking for the family at the Powell's home, after they are told that the 2 boys did not attend daycare. At this point the whole family is reported as missing. Josh then arrives at their home and claims Susan stayed home during their camping trip and he doesn't know where she is. Susan is never seen after this and her body is never found. Josh Powell is considered the main suspect after police find traces of Susan's blood in their house and letters from Susan, expressing that she feared for her life because of Josh and many others detailing his controlling and abusive behavior. After Susan's death, her parents and Josh get in bitter fight for custody of Susan's 2 children. The case was starting to heavily favor her parents and Josh was only allowed to see them during supervised visits. On the 5th of February, 2012, a social worker calls 911 because Josh took the kids from her during a supervised visit and would not let her in his house. The house then explodes, killing Josh and Susan's 2 children. This is an extremely simplified version of the case and I probably missed a lot of important information. There is really good podcast called Cold that covers the case in great detail. Bro, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content. It's free and that's a great price.